Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan Lugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Tuesday, November 14th. As we all know, the Jaguars coming off an ugly beatdown at the hands of the San Francisco 49ers. The Jaguars have struggled at home this year, obviously been very disappointing for their hometown fans, but the Jags have two big divisional games coming up, two big games that I think are going to help define their season. The Jaguars are currently 6-3, sitting at third in the AFC, first in the AFC South. But the Houston Texans are hot on their heels at 5-4, and the Colts aren't going away either. They're sitting at 5-5. It should come as no surprise that divisional games will help decide the Jaguars' fate in 2023. They have 3 divisional games remaining. They finish off the season with the Titans. No surprise there. But 2 straight divisional games here in Week 11 and Week 12 are going to help define what the Jaguars are in 2023, at least in the 2023 regular season, right? The Jags, they had to win in Week 18 last year, AFC South title game, to get into the playoffs. So this is common territory for the Jaguars, having to win divisional games to make sure that they can secure their playoff spot. And again, the Jaguars are 6-3. They're sitting at a good spot in the standings overall. First place in their division, third place in the conference overall. But that loss to the San Francisco 49ers, it has people kind of feeling the heat, right? And I think it's appropriate to be feeling the heat when you lose the way the Jaguars lost. And you combine that with the fact that even though the Jaguars were on a 5-game winning streak before that, there were obvious issues with the football team, right? Obvious issues when it comes to turnovers, when it comes to the offense not quite firing on all cylinders, right? So I think that the Jaguars, they do have some things to prove over the next couple weeks against these divisional opponents, the Titans this week in Jacksonville, and of course the Texans the following week. We'll get into it. I think that the distractions, obviously, you've got to get that out of your head. You've got to focus. When I'm talking about distractions, I'm talking about the current Zay Jones situation, which I don't want to comment too much on. Obviously did a short on it last night, but the fact of the matter is Zay Jones arrested on misdemeanor domestic battery charges. That's all I know right now. I'm not going to comment further on the situation. We obviously do not support violence of any kind, but do not want to comment on that situation because I don't know all the facts right now. But the Jaguars players and coaches, they've got to try to avoid that distraction, right? They've got to try to get that out of their head because, quite frankly, they have to. And if they don't, if they let that kind of ruin their mojo, which, of course, 49ers did a good job of that themselves. If they let that, take away from their focus the next 2 weeks, they're going to be in trouble. And again, you have to focus on beating the Titans this week. After that, you've got to focus on going 1-0 against the Texans the following week in Houston. The Jaguars last year, they were able to beat the Texans in Houston. They lost to them embarrassingly at home. Kind of same thing happened this year. You'll see if you can beat them on the road this year. But if you can do that, if you can go 1-0 each of the next 2 weeks against divisional opponents that you are very familiar with, you'd be 8-3 and feeling pretty darn good overall. The Titans right now, they are a team that they will let you get away with some silly mistakes. They're not a very good football team right now. Much more so than the 49ers, in terms of letting their opponents get away with things. They're starting a rookie quarterback. They've got a lot of issues throughout that roster right now. Their O-line is struggling. If you think the Jaguars' O-line is struggling, go look at the Titans right now. The Texans now, that game should be a war for me. I think it should be a really, really tough game. They're playing very well. They're playing above their heads a little bit, in my opinion. With a young team, sometimes you're just too young to know what you don't know, and you can just continue to ball out because you don't know that you shouldn't be doing this. You don't know that you're not as talented as you've been looking. And I do think they have talent, obviously, young talent. I think there are some talent deficient spots on their roster, but very well coached football team by DeMeco Ryans, Bobby Sloak and company. Great young quarterback in CJ Stroud. Got some playmakers doing some things for him. Still think the Jaguars are a better football team by quite a wide margin. So again, if you handle your business next 2 weeks against divisional opponents, you're 8-3. It's a pretty damn good record. Then you have the gauntlet of the AFC North, which right now, in this moment, I'd probably pick the Jaguars to win probably one of those games, one of those 3 games against the AFC North, right? You've got the Bengals Monday Night Football, you've got the Ravens at home, and then you've also got the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. So I think you look at those games, huge games, in terms of kind of figuring out where you stand in the AFC pecking order, because all 3 of those teams right now would be in the playoffs. But if you win one of those games, which that's what I would predict right now for the Jaguars based on how they're playing, that gets you to 9-5. Again, sitting pretty well. The Texans at that point would have a minimum of 5 losses. They already have 4 losses on the season. If you beat them next week, that puts them at 5 losses. And while they are a good and young and feisty and well-coached team with a very, very good young quarterback, I don't expect them to run the table. I don't think that they're that good. Is it possible? Sure. Do they have a favorable schedule? Sure. But I don't expect them to run the table. I mean, you've seen them lose to teams like Panthers, Falcons, right? So for me, if the Jaguars are sitting at 9-5 following that stretch against the AFC North, I think you're feeling pretty good. Again, if you're going to win some of those games against the AFC North, I do think you're going to have to cut down on the turnovers. 3 games following that to finish the season out, not bad. Buccaneers, Panthers, Titans. You're going to be favored in each of those games. And if that's how it plays out, you're sitting at 12-5. Pretty damn good season, right? If the Jaguars stay focused, stay on message, and again, limit the turnovers a little bit, like you don't have to play 100% clean football every week to win games, but you cannot be putting the ball in harm's way the way you have the last few games. There's no doubt about that. Those turnovers have become a little bit of an epidemic in Jacksonville. But if you can limit those a little bit, I still think you can win 12 games. I know that might sound crazy to folks sitting here looking at what happened on Sunday, but the 49ers were a buzzsaw. That is a well-coached team. Kyle Shanahan, unbelievable offensive coach. Unbelievable talent on both sides of the ball. They were a buzzsaw. I don't think the sky is falling. I think the Jaguars are resilient. Again, every time they've gotten their you-know-what handed to them, they've bounced back in a big way, and I think they're going to be able to do that again in 2023, but they've got to show that resiliency against some divisional opponents the next 2 weeks to get back on the right track. Because if you don't handle business against your division these next 2 weeks, you lose to the Titans or Texans, or both, which I don't see happening. You're going to be sitting there, and the Texans are going to be in first place in the division if they beat you. Bottom line. As long as the Texans don't fall to the Cardinals this week, which is possible. The Cardinals are feisty with Kyler Murray. I don't think they're super talented, but I do think they're well coached now, and they've got some things going for them. I don't think it's a gimme for the Texans, but I would pick the Texans to win that game. But again, if you don't handle business now, I don't think you win your division. And I think you're going to be skating on thin ice when it comes to making the playoffs. If you don't handle these divisional games right now, these 2 divisional games, you're going to go into these games against the AFC North and you're going to be battling against these teams for playoff seeding, right? It's going to be tough sledding. Those teams are tough. Tough defenses, mostly good offenses. The Browns offense starting to look like maybe Deshaun Watson's figuring it out. We'll see how it plays out. But if you don't handle business now, I do not think you're winning your division. Bottom line. But I do think they handle business. I think they right the wrongs of Week 10 a little bit. I think they get Jaguars fans calmed down a little bit. And they put themselves in position to win their division and host a home playoff game for the 2nd straight year. That's how I see it playing out. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Hit me up on Twitter at Jordan Lugo. Follow Generation Jaguar at Generation Jag. Hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Notification bell so you don't miss a show. And of course, check out genjag.com/shop. Pick up some new Duval gear. Y'all have a good one.